Safe to say, All Elite Wrestling is now 5 years old. They've had plenty of time to establish certain stars, to give us top-notch moments, and of course, with that comes their very own Mount Rushmore of AEW. So, with that said, I want to make it very clear. This is my list. This is my opinion. It's very subjective. So, I firmly understand most of you will not agree with it. Most of you are going to have different options in terms of who goes on this list, who goes on the honorable mentions. So I understand that. But with that said, here we go. Here are the honorable mentions, very few, that currently are up there when it comes to the AEW Mount Rushmore. And of course, I got to talk about the current man behind the scenes that is, in my opinion, carrying the company creatively and especially teaching a lot of the younger guys how to perform in front of a live audience. Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon, is a part of the honorable mentions, and I'm just putting him down here because I think his career is winding down. He's going to retire from AEW very soon, and he's going to do so pretty much without winning any championships in AEW, which is pretty much the only reason why he's not a part of this Mount Rushmore. He's never been world champion. He's never been TNT champ. He's never been international champ up until this point. So, his career currently in AEW, he's given us great performances. Put over MJF, faced off against Zack Sabre Jr., was a part of the BCC. So, just based off of that, Bryan Danielson, you could make an argument he could eventually get up there, but he just doesn't have the in-ring accolades to get up there. And of course, I'm basing this in terms also of business, what kind of impact they've had in the company since its inception. So, Danielson, one of my honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 2 for AEW. We got to talk about the devil himself. And no, I'm not talking about MJF. I'm talking about CM Punk, a very controversial figure. A figure, pretty much, I'm putting him as an honorable mention, number 1, because he is a former 2-time AEW World Champion. He definitely made an impact on Arrival, and whenever he did in AEW, I think they could have used him better creatively in AEW. That's on Tony Khan, not really on Punk, but again, that also has to do with the fact that Punk didn't really get along with a lot of the main stars in AEW. But in the 2 years that CM Punk was a part of AEW, he sold merch, he sold tickets, he got ratings up, slightly up from AEW's normal numbers. And CM Punk is easily, in my opinion, going to be the biggest signing All Elite Wrestling has ever in company history. That might change. I don't know. I can't tell the future. But as of right now, there is no bigger signing that AEW has done and can do or will do in the very near future than Phil Brooks, CM Punk. But again, all the controversy that he created in AEW for the bad press that he created. And again, controversy creates cash, much like Eric Bischoff said, and any publicity is good publicity, okay, but that doesn't really apply, in my opinion, to AEW because it definitely created too much chaos for AEW for All Elite Wrestling. So CM Punk is a part of my honorable mentions. And finally, you got Cody Rhodes, the roller coaster, one of the founding members of AEW, a former EVP, currently one of WWE's biggest stars, and even though he was never AEW World Champion, he was TNT Champion. He was, for better or for worse, one of the faces of AEW. You could say the face of the company for the first 2-3 years, even though he was never a part of the main event, even though he was never world champion. But Cody Rhodes is definitely someone who needs to go into history as one of AEW's main guys. So that's why I'm putting him up there. So, with that said, we've got ourselves 4 spots on the AEW Mount Rushmore, and I'm going to start it off with the very first main event, the very first world champion, and you know my opinion currently on Chris Jericho, but he was Le Champion. He was the very first AEW World Heavyweight Champion, and he did so for a reason. He was the World Champion for a reason. Because back then in 2019, Nobody knew who anybody on that roster was except for Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho is the reason they got a deal on TNT. Chris Jericho is the reason fans paid attention. Because nobody was paying attention to New Japan Pro Wrestling, at least on a grander scale. Nobody was paying attention to New Japan Pro Wrestling, even though they had Kenny Omega. Nobody was paying attention to Ring of Honor Wrestling, even though they had the Young Bucks and Cody Rhodes. But the minute Chris Jericho signed off with AEW, everybody turned their heads. Everybody noticed. Everybody knew the name AEW. Everybody knew the name of Tony Khan. And the fact of the matter is, making him the very first world champion back at, if I'm not mistaken, Double or Nothing, 2019. I might be a little bit off on that, but making him the very first champion was the absolute best decision for AEW at that moment in time. You can't tell me otherwise. Now, you ask about Chris Jericho today, I'm not as excited, but there's no argument to be made. Chris Jericho is definitely going to be forever a part of AEW's Mount Rushmore because of the impact that he made and the importance that he has for that brand for the next decades to come, for its entire history. So I'm going to put him up there. Second on that Mount Rushmore, got to talk about the cleaner himself, the former holder of the longest reigning AEW World Championship reign in history, but the best bout machine, Kenny Omega. Hell, Chris Jericho might have put AEW on the map, but make no mistake about it, the first 3 years of the company, AEW was created, was founded. It was a platform strictly to have Kenny Omega embedded, that's not how you said embedded, in the minds of pro wrestling fans, the casual wrestling fans. And to this day, even though he's 40 years old, we just saw that fantastic main event on Collision against MJF. The guy can still go in the ring. And like I said, Kenny Omega is one of, if not the best superstars in AEW history. He's a part of the Mount Rushmore, bar none. Now, the next two men. Jon Moxley, the man formerly known as Dean Ambrose, of course, but Jon Moxley is, if I'm not mistaken, the only three-time AEW World Champion, and he is that for a reason. Hell, CM Punk got fired. CM Punk got suspended. CM Punk created so much controversy, so much backstage turmoil, and AEW pretty much every single time relied to and went to Jon Moxley. And there's a reason for that. Hell, I'm saying that a lot. Excuse me, I'm barely noticing it. But when he signed with AEW, before CM Punk, Jon Moxley was the biggest signing in AEW history at that moment in time, and there's a reason for that. He's done everything he can to put the company over. He's put the company over himself many, many times. AEW's been a priority for Moxley, And that, in my opinion, for my book, he's a part of Mount Rushmore. Let's get the hell out of here. That simple. Jon Moxley, a part of the AEW Mount Rushmore. And the fourth and final member, you guys saw it coming. Of course, I'm talking about the actual devil himself, MJF, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, current AEW World Champion, current owner of the Triple B. And again, he's going to re-sign with AEW. No doubt in my mind about that. So with that said, what he's able to create, he's the biggest superstar, homegrown superstar that they've been able to create since AEW's founding. MJF currently is a part of the Mount Rushmore for what he's doing, for what he did in the past, and for what he's about to do in the future. There's tons of gas left in this man's tank, and I can't wait to see what we get from MJF next, whether it be a feud against Adam Cole, and he's eventually going to put guys over down the line. But as of right now, I think he's 27, 28 years old, still very young. This guy's going to be the face of the company of AEW, and he currently is, for the next 10 years at least. I'm calling it right now. So with that said, taking that into account, and I get it, it's it might be a little bit early to call it that much. But hey, MJF is a part of that Mount Rushmore for AEW. Sue me. That's my opinion. So, just a little recap. Honorable mentions: Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, Cody Rhodes. But the Mount Rushmore of AEW, we're talking about Le Champion Chris Jericho, the Cleaner, the Best Bout Machine, Kenny Omega, the most loyal outside star AEW got, the man that's put the company on his back so many times, Jon Moxley, and the devil himself, the future face of AEW, current and future face of AEW, the man that is the sole reason, in my opinion, that attracts so many viewership, so many eyeballs to the product itself when it comes to AEW today. MJF, Maxwell, Jacob Friedman. That is your Mount Rushmore for AEW. So with that said, what are your thoughts? What are your comments? What's your own list as far as the Mount Rushmore for AEW goes? Leave it in the comment section below. So with that said, I'm Alexis Carrillo. This has been Wrestling Talk, and I'll see you next time.